This is Coffee signing on. Alright, so last time I hinted that I would show how I use the map editor to do these things, and that we would see how we could gather data to confirm the wiki's number of 1 in 14 for an EM plant using an ideal module mix. So here's how I would do that. I'm going to go in and I'm going to set this to an appropriate timescale. And what I've noticed running these is that if I count out 1 1000, 2 1000, on this one, I can say 1 1000, 2 1000, and I can see this move about 3 seconds. 1 1000, 2 1000, based off of these peaks and valleys. I can set this up to 64x, and I can say 1 1000, 2 1000, oh, I'm at another peak and valley point. 1 1000, 2 1000. So that means I'm always stuck at about ×2. And you can see it bumping up and down without any consequence, and pretty randomly. So we're just going to set this to 2x, and accept that that's what we get. It lets me maneuver around easier anyways. Now, with that being said, what we do is you either type in /editor and you edit the map gem settings so that enemies are not an issue, or you go to the map editor and set up a scenario without enemies. Then you go down here, type in demo, and hit check, and this is in the surfaces tab to get a new surface. It'll be at the end of this list. We'll go over here. If you want it to look official, hit fill with lab tiles. I don't mind it looking a little bit nice to my eye. What we're going to do is we're going to take an EM plant, and we're going to get this set up with the wiki's suggested ideal modules. And then we're going to get some recyclers. You can use any grade of recyclers you want for science. In real life, you have to buy all of this, so keep that in mind. This will be a direct insertion build. Since we're in the map editor, it's fair to use infinite inputs because you'll be able to get enough resources for science. We want to saturate the manufacturing building here so that it can create quality items throughout the build and throughout the process. Then we're going to do a series of joins. You can be as artistic and creative as you want, but we always end up with a similar pattern on these builds. Because we have to do all the manufacturing. And that means we're doing it at normal quality, we're doing it at uncommon quality, and all of the flavors of ice cream in between. On the last building, we handle it a bit specially because it's going to be doing the recipe as a pure component. So we have to handle our materials on a garbage in, garbage out basis. I overload these lines in research, but not in practice, because I want this entire assembly line to disappear into my research section. The more questions I have for myself, the more questions that other people can ask me. That's how this goes. We'll take our assembly lines, throw them down, filter for our legendaries. If you're truly committed, you can, of course, build this to your construction standard. For I/O purposes, we can also stack. But we have to be a little bit careful to force these stack inserters to drop single items. I do that by saying read hand contents hold, use filters blacklist when it's appropriate, or setting the stack size to 1 when it reads a single item using a combinator. And that's going to depend on how saturated this assembly line is. Shout out to Hella Gugner and their Coverex build, where I saw that trick be developed. Realistically, it would be great if we filtered everything, but the difference between theory and practice is sometimes pretty deep. So I'll just merge these lines nice and sloppy like that, or just put it right like so. I'm going to look for builds-ups of raw material throughout the process. I'm going to look for places where I missed a detail. And in this case, that's the filtration of parts. I won't even joke about missing any quality materials off of this line. But we don't expect all that much out, so we can do something like this. Perform that final join. And you can optimize if you want, but this is the difference between research builds and normal production builds. We don't have to. You can put in power if you want. I think this is just a research build, so I'll put in a global electric network and not worry about plugins. I'll add a power interface down here, and that will simulate this entire surface having power like a space platform would. For the sake of a blueprint, though, for others, while this gets set up to run, let's put in power so that it can run. And that's our test setup. it's stacking correctly. And we set filters so that it ejects everything in the hands. Alright, that should be hopefully the last configuration issue. And then all of the quality stuff is going to go into a chest setup to remove unfiltered items and have nothing in it to form an infinite void. It's all going for legendary automation science. Check that our buildings are working. Occasionally, check that our assembly lines are emptying at a decent clip. Once this buildup is gone, our production statistics are just going to go away, so just make sure we don't see things packing up in our assembly line. And then we set this to our 2x, because that's as fast as it will go, and we make dinner, have a chat with a friend, post on internet forums, take a walk, that's how this goes. It's going to be a slow process. 10 minutes is going to be 5 minutes, but maybe that's why there's not so many studies in science using this method. While we're doing that, we can look at our production graph and justify to ourselves that, yes, we need to just let this go for a bit. So, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have this play for a custom tick of 10 minutes, and then I'm going to have time stop. So it'll be right here when it's done. Alright. So, I've made some new friends on the internet, taken my walk, made my dinner. We'll pretend that this has gone on for hours. I sit down again and I look very carefully at this to see how I analyze it. The first issue is these products finished. That's for all time on this machine. I want to know exactly how much has gone in and out of this process. That's why I need these production statistics, so I have anchors in time where I can say, it's this number. And I'll be able to keep myself honest in that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, that's crafting speed 1.75. It's 1.75 speed. I use 1 copper plate a second. Well, no, I don't. I use 1 copper plate every half a second. So that's something that I have to keep track of as I analyze this. I'm going to make 2 copper cables, so there's going to be some kind of inherent productivity to this that I have to filter out when I analyze it. So what we're going to say is that I'm going to use 2 plates every second. because I make 2 of these recipes per second. And then I'm going to multiply that by 1.75. And if I go and I pull open a terminal, or I get out a desk calculator, it'll be 1.75 times 2 is 3.5. And this is because when I look at this output, there can be rounding errors. As for the plus 17.5 a second of cables, that I don't care about. I'm analyzing for legendaries here. What this will tell me is that I use 3.5 items over 600 seconds. And I'm producing 2 of those. Oh look, time froze. I have this magic number, 346. And what I see when I divide that magic number 346 divided by 4200 is 0.08238095. Well, what's 1 in 14? 0.0714 and then some change. If I take these numbers as ratios, I'm at 86%. So I have to give this more time. 10 minutes is not enough. However, I'm willing to do that, clearly. So we're going to punch this in, and we're going to see what giving this an hour does. Because as you can see, this number is hopping up and down. And I'm going to bet that if I keep hustling this for just a few minutes, you'll see this jump up and down. Well, that number could be higher. Oh, look, that number went lower too. So this is because it is a random number generator. There's a couple of ways around this. I could make multiple simulations, and I'm going to divide out my time times items produced, right? And I'm using the input rate that I've calculated from the crafting speed and the recipe in order to get that with the best accuracy. If I'm trying to do this as a all the bells and whistles, fully accurate simulation. But this is how I'm doing it. What I'm not going to do is look at the products finished, because if I queue those up for multiple times, you can imagine that that's the products finished for all time, and that includes that productivity bonus of plus 150% there. So, no love. Oh look, a huge spike. And we can see over an hour's time, we're seeing giant spikes, the start of our production. But if we apply this to another surface, all of those spikes can get evened out, and we stop seeing this number jump around in a way that's meaningful. And gradually, this moves towards something that can be considered accurate, although in this particular case, don't trust this 9.5 a minute number. We'll see next time that this is using different production techniques to get that. And it's going for copper plates anyways. And you can already kind of see that with this data, because this is way more effective. That's the relevance of this building, multiplying everything by plus 175. When you get that percent, the way that you need to think about that is 1 plus 175 is going to be 2.75 times, or 275%. That's how these research bonuses work. That's why when you get to level 30 on these bonuses, it's going to stop adding productivity to almost all entities in the game. And once you get beyond study, of course, you can scale this section up individually and then attach it to a mine, which this infinity chest is standing in for. With the recyclers, it's a bit different, because these are much, much faster. The only reason why we have so many arms here is because we could get multiple qualities of items in a second. And this is where theory and modeling and building a simulation kind of diverges from practice. Even if on paper I'm using all of the same tools that I would have in the video game to get a similar result. Theory is always going to diverge from practice a little bit like that. The other way is going to be in the number of recyclers in this section. You can test out what you would need by reducing these until you see a buildup on these lines, but for the purposes of data collection, it's not advisable. And it's not necessarily something that you would want to try out. And now what I'm going to do is, with the magic of film editing, I'm going to go and record other demos and do my analysis on those. And once I'm done recording, I will present this, how it looks after an hour, and we'll see if our number has gotten any closer to what the wiki is from 15%. And the wonderful thing about production statistics and video editing is I can do all sorts of things to edit, right? I can make the screen bigger. I can make the screen smaller. I can spin the screen upside down. I probably will do at least one of those things, but I'll try and minimize it to avoid, you know, making somebody dizzy and angry. I've already got all of these parts shooting out of the ends of these buildings, and I have to isolate my production graph so that any of this makes sense, right? But this peak that I see in this production graph, well, that's in that 10 minutes. That's that peak. Yes, some of this will get cut off, but I can go and I can pick that peak out. Maybe not over a huge time scale, but pretty honestly. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, if I'm making blueprints of this and giving them out on my Ko-fi page, guess what? Somebody else is going to put this up against a random number generator with a different seed. My only hope is that those random numbers do the same thing over time if somebody quizzes me. And beyond that, if I'm doing this at a hobbyist level, I don't need to record videos with scripts. Certainly, I don't have a script for this one. So, I can just react to what I see. If I see something which contradicts what the game should be doing, I get to call the devs and be like, guys, what's going on? Did you remember to seed your random number generator? Or maybe I check my PC to see if something's running in the background too hard. I've certainly seen this slow down a little bit while I've been filming. I don't have to deceive myself. That doesn't have to be part of my script. I wouldn't want to suffer a bad workstation anyways. This is my video game time that I'm putting into this. Maybe if I were crazy, I would lie to myself. I have a disability, but I'm not insane. That's not how attention deficit disorder works. Quite the opposite. You put a lot of energy into observing things. And you don't necessarily like things that are dishonest. Even if you do come up with some crazy stories because you live with a little bit more energy. God, even as a nerd. But this is what you're going to get out of this. And if somebody is going to say, well, that's your tip jar, I don't need your tip jar, and I can build this myself with robots, there's nothing up the robot sleeve either, right? You can see what's going on with belts. Maybe the bots will hide some things from you for a moment, but they're not going to hide anything from this production statistics tab. The buildings are all going to build the same. Again, this is about looking at what the data gives me. So that's what this series is going to build on. And you can see all I'm doing is simple ratios once I get those timings. That's all I really need to confirm that this system works. So I'll come back here once my hour is done, and we'll see how this works. Alright, 10 minutes has passed in filming this, and there's been a take. How's my demo cooking? It's coming along. Now instead of 38.8, in spite of these giant jumps, we've got 31.6. And we could see at a specific time, if we paused it, what our production is. 1865. And we get to have even more fun. 60 times 60, 60 seconds, 60 minutes. And then multiply by 3.5, and then by 2. 25200, 1865 divided by 256, 25200, 0.0740079. That's what I'm talking about. I'm told that the error that I experience in this is proportional to the square root. But that's picked up by a very, very kind man on a wiki, or, sorry, on the forums for Factorio, having a discussion which was rather stressful because of another person in the room. The thing is what we can see by the numbers is the square root of, say, 4 is 2. But the square root of, say, 16 would be 4. And if you take those as a ratio, you can see how the error is being driven down as you add data in. This is based off of something called the central limit theorem. And unfortunately, I have to put my energy into video production and in working to make ends meet, and not into studying mathematics. So there are limits. I can only present these ideas to you, and I hope I do well enough in that. Alright. Next time, we're going to cover how we produce copper plates without relying on productivity, and what role fluids play in that. It's going to be a lot quicker than this, because this is the full demo and sort of the full theory work. If we go to 10 hours, and maybe I'll do a catch-up on that, then I expect this to get even more accurate. Then 0.074 instead of 0.071 as the wiki predicts. Although, who knows? Maybe if I go and check Konages' links, the ratio is slightly different, and maybe there's some rounding error in what's being reported on the wiki. That is sort of the power of working with people, and also the weakness. I have to check each person's work individually. Until next time, though,